Hey, Fandroids. Welcome back. And this is, at least as I'm recording it, a special Valentine's Day edition of the Weekly Stack. It's not special, it's just talking about books I love. So, uh, once again, I want to remind you the rules, such as they are, is that every week I go to House of Secrets in Burbank, California, and pick up a stack of comics, either things that have been held for me by pre-order with Diamond. I'm sorry, it's not Diamond anymore. Lunar, Penguin Random House, etc. And going around the shelves and seeing if there's anything else that catches my eye, because I go through the catalogs really fast. And I'll be honest, they're not the easiest thing to negotiate. So then I come back, read a few, read many, and try to talk about why I liked the ones that I've read and those that I still bought, and I'm still a few issues behind. And I keep gesturing to stacks and stacks of comics off to the left of me. And I'm almost there. I've at least gotten them all organized to a point where I can read small runs. I just caught up on Drawing Blood, for example. So I want to start off with actually one I did not buy at House of Secrets in Burbank, but I saw a post, someone complaining that the indie comics world was not getting covered enough by so-called comics journalists. And I say so-called because, I'm a journalist because I say I am, not because anybody crown me. Except I've been doing this for 26 years, reading comics, commenting on comics, writing about them, writing some comics. Hey, thanks for backing horror, not hate. But anyway, a combination of things that I read that and went, I have bought some indies lately that I did not get through House of Secrets. And a friend of mine texted after the last video and said, I notice you read a lot of DC, which I say, yeah, I do. And then I buy a lot of DC, especially with the DC K.O. event going on. And I read a lot of Marvel on the Marvel Comics app. And so maybe I should do a breakdown of, Marvel, DC, and global comics at some point. I subscribe to all three. I'm grateful for all three in the middle of the night when I wake up. I don't want to bother anybody else. Read comics on my phone. Probably not the best for my eyes, but hey, that's why I wear glasses. So I'm going to start with something I bought at Pasadena Comic Con a few weeks ago. And just because I love the sheer lunacy of these books, Werewolf Frankenstein, and its sequel is called Bride of Werewolf Frankenstein. And I know that I've seen this book, at least at Collector's Paradise in North Hollywood. I would assume all three of them have copies of it. And this is by Chris Robinson is the writer, Mark Yarza is the artist, Steve Cannon is the colorist. Yes. And DC Hopkins is the letterer. And these are available, I guess they were through Kickstarter, because it looks like there will be a third one. And why I'm really glad that I bought these both. I bought both Werewolf Frankenstein and Bride of Werewolf Frankenstein, and had them autographed by Chris Robinson. First time I met him, really nice guy, and I love that it takes it seriously. Like there's a warning up front for people who are grieving, perhaps, or having issues with grief and loss, but still there is something absolutely wildly goofy about this. Is basically talk about your monster mashups. Werewolf Frankenstein is exactly that. The Frankenstein monster, after the events of the novel, was bitten by an alpha werewolf, and his body parts are fighting with lycanthropy, and there's a female werewolf tracking him down because she wants him to take control of the pack. And as if that wasn't enough, then there is Invisible Dracula. That is apparently the third one. So I should look this up on Kickstarter. There's the Invisible Man meshed with Dracula. Love it. And then the Bride is both, but also involving trying to get the Phantom of the Opera mortal warrior like Frankenstein with the werewolf curse. So just really fun, good art. And maybe look this up on werewolffrankenstein.com and see if you can buy that way. Anyway, these were very fun. Glad I bought them, and I want to give that shout out to Chris Robinson, who was also responsible for gathering and reprinting recently All Negro Comics, which was from the 40s. And is exactly what it sounds like. And I had first read about that book in Invisible Men by Ken Quattro, about African American creators in comics in the 40s, and how important they were, obviously, to the development of comics as we know them now, etc. Where I first learned about Matt Baker. I haven't actually yet read the reprint that he did, but I did buy it. So I'm hoping I will talk to Chris Robinson sometime in the near future about reviving that. So let me get into what I did pick up at House of Secrets. As promised in last month, Hank Howard, the pizza detective in the Two Hollywoods, issue number 2 from Bad Idea Comics, and this is by Robert Venditti, who I have enjoyed his work. David Lapham is the art, Dave Sharp is letters, and Rico Renzi has done the logo design. And this book wraps up faster than I thought. I did not realize there's only 2 issues, but really the way the story was set up, it's kind of both logical and yes, a little silly. But it probably would not have made for a good like 5-issue miniseries, if you will. But what I found really, really compelling in the back was there's a preview of the Hab. And as much as it sometimes gets difficult for me to find where credits are, etc., I do appreciate previews at the end, and I will get back to that in just a moment. But this is the Hab. Joshua Dysart is the writer. David Lapham and Bill Sienkiewicz are the artists. Matt Hollingsworth is the colorist. Dave Sharp is the letters. Rico Renzi again, logo design. And the Hab is already, I can tell, this is classically the kind of thing that Josh loves to tackle. And that is that he's taking a very frightening real world consequence, which is, uh, in this case, looks like, toxic waste being buried underground, hoping that no one notices that it's like leaching in, etc. And this is apparently turning into some kind of big sci-fi horror story involving people that are going into these underground caverns. Um, because it's Josh Dysart, who I think again history will look back on, and I probably won't live long enough to see my prediction come true, but history will look back on as one of the most important writers of this era, because he does write fun stuff, but there's always something underneath that is of urgency to him, of concern. He's done a lot of comics. When I talk about comics journalism, actually doing journalism in the form of comics. Hank Howard, Pizza Detective, worth picking up for that preview. And it was a fun story in itself. But now I know I need to order that from Bad Idea. It's supposed to come out in April, the Hab. So here's there. This is another one, by the way, that I picked up because of a preview in the back of one of the DC K.O crossovers, Bleeding Hearts, number 1, uh, part of the relaunch of Vertigo, which I didn't read everything that Vertigo did back in the 90s and early 2010s, but I enjoyed it anyway. Dennis Camp is the writer, Stepan Morian is the artist, and Matt Hollingsworth is the color artist. Now, this is a take on zombies, which I'm gonna be honest, feels a little bit like Warm Bodies. We may recall that movie, which I think was a novel as well. But it's still this very own different thing. It's a little more visceral than Warm Bodies was trying to be, and a very different rule to how these zombies work and so forth. So there's something interesting going on. I don't know, but I'm glad I read it. Dennis Camp is an interesting writer. I'm paying a lot more attention to. I liked the art by Stepan Morian, and I don't think I know their work, but maybe I do. uh, it's definitely a war between hordes of zombies and the few last living people, but there's a great intelligence with the zombies, so different from The Walking Dead, if that's what you're thinking in comics. We'll never get tired of zombies in popular culture. So Bleeding Hearts #1, you can pick that up at your local store right now. Oh, this one makes me sad. Not because it's bad, but because I know it didn't really resonate with American audiences. And this is The Fall of Ultraman from Marvel Comics. Marvel had a licensing deal with Subaraya Productions, which was the company that obviously produces Ultraman shows or Ultra shows. I'm not sure how they if they actually call it all Ultraman. I think they do, but they did this alternate universe version of or parallel universe version of Ultraman, which sort of folded in some of the mythologies of the various series. And that includes, another one that did that was the anime series on Netflix, Ultraman, which was based on a manga that kind of ignored everything after the first Ultraman series in 1966 and brought it up, but still included Ultraman Ace, Ultraman Jack, Ultra 7, and recast all the villains. But anyway, the writers are Kyle Higgins and Matt Groom. The artist is David Tinto. The color artist is Rochelle Rosenberg, and the letterer is VC's Ariana Mar. Why this makes me sad is because I knew when I ran preview art on fanboyplanet.com that this was a one shot. Each one of the stories that Marvel has told about Ultraman have been miniseries. I did not know that this would actually read like, oh, Kyle Higgins and and Matt Groom had bigger plans, and they suddenly had only one issue to wrap up. I can't call it a trilogy, tetralogy, because no, there were three Ultraman miniseries, and then Ultraman X Avenger, X the Avengers, and which are included in this. There's a reference in there, so that happened in the same in the same canon. But this, I realize, reads like what would happen when I remember this vividly in the 70s, issue of Fantastic Four where a writer was, I can't remember which writer, it might have been Steve Englehart, might have been. So somebody can correct me. Chuck Surface, if you're watching, that he had been taken off of Fantastic Four and he had one issue to wrap everything up. So it was sort of like they were forced to live in a dream for one issue of which they saw all the storylines he would have played out, and that's what this is. Uh, a character comes from the 1 year in the future, warns what's going to happen in the year ahead, and so you get little glimpses of all of what it's going to be, would have been, and Hayata and Ultraman determine that they're going to go forward with that, knowing that it may cause their death, and that's okay. But you don't really get the story. You just get the sense of, wow, that would have been a great slam bang end of the epic, but were not allowed the space. And my prediction had been that the sales weren't that great. But as you can tell, I am a big Ultraman fan. And so I did like what Marvel was doing with Ultraman, even though it wasn't the Ultra I knew, but that's okay. As I'm discovering with both a YouTube channel from Subaraya and Prime has a lot of the series, old and new, and so I've been kind of catching up that way. Apologize if I have weird stops and starts. I cannot seem to troubleshoot this problem in my recording. I may have to switch from StreamYard over to Zoom when I do this because it's just not. I don't know. Anyway, next DC K.O tie-in, sort of Aquaman number 14, uh, which is Jeremy Adams is the writer. I think I mentioned him last week. He's good. Daniel Bayliss on art, Rex Locus in colors, and Dave Sharp is letterer. They are creating a whole, Aquaman family, of course, and Mira, and there's a grown-up daughter and some time traveling, and the real Aquaman is in the DC K.O event, and Aquaman does appear here, but it's not quite right. I do love that Jeremy Adams has brought Arian, Lord of Atlantis, back in some form or another. Um, Even though when I was reading that book back in the 80s, I didn't really necessarily feel like, oh, it's the same Atlantis as the one in Aquaman. I thought this was just a, completely separate, one closed off continuity thing. But it ties into the bigger DC universe. And okay, so it's a character I like who comes back. I don't know if anybody's commented on the fact that in previous issues we had the Captain Nemo, who was very much the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen version of Captain Nemo, which is probably more accurate to the Jules Verne novel than what the Disney version of Nemo was. But anyway, yes, it's a tie-in, but it's not as strong. Whereas the actual book, DC K.O. number 4, it's still not over. But this is the issue that when you pull back the, it has the big three versus the big three of the absolute universe, although they too have been even further corrupted by the energy of dark side. So they do get, it is and it isn't the characters you're coming to really love in the absolute universe. Scott Snyder is the writer. Joshua Williamson is the writer on a backup story. Javi Fernandez is the artist, and Hermanico is the artist of the backup. And Alejandro Sanchez is the colorist. Hassan Osmani Elhau is the letterer. And the backup story, I have to remind myself, it's kind of involving a more story about Darkseid and the Legion, his Legion of superheroes. Why it didn't quite um, stick in my mind was because I was focused so much on the main story. Still enjoyable, still looking forward to what will be the video game. Will there be a video game? I don't know, but I keep claiming there will be. We'll see. It's coming close to wrapping up, and I feel this way about comics in general. I think this is part of at my age, the exhaustion is when you are destroying and remaking the universe on a almost annual basis. It's hard to feel connected to the story. I can enjoy it, but it's hard to feel connected. And I will say, I think it's one of the things that I've loved about the Absolute Universe. I read it and I completely forget that it was meant to have something with his ultimately with his DCKO event. So, you know, uh, here, a book that's not DC from Image Comics, Geiger, number 21. That's Jeff Johns, Gary Frank, Brad Anderson, and Rob Lee. And appreciate, by the way, that they put the full names of all the creators involved on the cover. Much easier. So Geiger, I'm a few issues behind, but I did uh, stack them up, and so I think this is the next book I'm going to catch up on because I really enjoyed this, even though some people have told me that it's like Fallout, Las Vegas, or at least it started that way, and it's beyond. If it did, it's beyond that. And now I'm watching Fallout on Prime, sure, but I'd never played the game, so I was able to enjoy this completely on my own. But this does involve the Northman. Was that his name? The See, this is the thing. At my age, the Northerner. So we first actually saw in an issue of Redcoat. So it's all starting to tie together. Looking forward to catching up here. So I feel bad that I have not because I do really enjoy that book. Although I think, as I've said before, Redcoat is the one I love the most out of Ghost Machine. This is Supergirl, and I've called out Supergirl before too from DC as a book that is very clearly not meant for me, but I love it anyway because it's so it does make me wish that it existed when my oldest daughter, who was really into comics, it was sometimes a little hard for me to figure out like what she should read and that would be appropriate that her mother would allow to, and that's not a cut on her mother. It's just, I understand. We're talking like when she was 6 or 7, and she loved comics. She knew I loved comics, and again, finding the thing. I wish this book existed when she was of that age because this would have been perfect. The right kind of, I don't want to say innocence or naivete, but kind of a throwback to an earlier version of Supergirl. The writer and cover artist is Sophie Campbell. The artist is Joe Quinones in this issue. I like Joe's art. The letterer is Dave Sharp, and there are a bunch of variant cover artists. But this is a callback to all the things that have been, I think kind of fun in um, in Supergirl's history, and while also bringing in the elements that have come in throughout the rest of the All In universe. But this feels out of step with the All In universe, and I'm okay with that because the purpose of the All In part was to have, as they always say, right, jumping on points for new readers as well. And this is absolutely, you can give this to a middle school uh, student, either any gender, and it's just good. It's just good. I've never met Sophie Campbell. I would really like to now, just to thank her for a really cool book. Um, I also want to say my youngest was also into comics. It was just somehow a little easier when they were young, and they kind of started reading comics on their own about the time of New 52. So maybe not the best of, of comics in my mind, but they started with Justice League, enjoyed that, and they've gone on more to manga and anime, and that's okay. So, Alien versus Captain America. I should have read that. I just kind of forgot that it was in my stack that way. Frank Thierry, Stefano Raffaele, and Niraj Menon. I assume it's going to, it's coming to a really good ending. I assume. So I've enjoyed it. I just forgot that it was in my stack. Space Ghost #8. So from Dynamite, David Pepos is the writer, Jonathan Lau is the artist, Andrew Dahlhaus is the colorist, and Taylor Esposito is the letterer. I'm digging Space Ghost, not just again because I think David Pepos is a great writer and a friend, but because it's one of those when we go through a lot of these, right, that it evokes what I dimly remember from watching the original Hanna-Barbera series, and also, you know, infuses it with a modern feeling, but it doesn't feel awkward. And nor do I think when DC was doing the crossovers, like there's Future Quest, you can probably find trades somewhere on that. They weren't, those weren't bad. I just particularly like this. It feels very of the moment for 2025 and 2026 because I know I'm in February 2026. I'm just saying Space Ghost has been going on actually, I think since 2024. So I got to catch up. I know where those are too. Absolute Wonder Woman annual. I kind of have lost track. I think because like the regular DC books become uh they make specials from time to time and they give it a different title. Like, you know, last last week had that Superman Chains of Love, which is really about the Creeper and Livewire. I like the kind of the revival of the annuals, but I haven't read the absolute annuals yet. Kelly Thompson is the writer, and Mattia Ulis, de Ulius. Please, as always, correct me on my pronunciation if you know how it is correctly pronounced, and please do so, relatively politely. I'm trying. I just obviously, whether you call this part of the parasocial relationship, there are many people's names I've never heard spoken out loud. So Becca Carey is the letterer, and so I don't know if this is okay to just like if you haven't been reading Absolute Wonder Woman, if you can just dive right into this annual, if it's kind of a forgotten story or something like that. I don't know because I'm a few issues behind on the Absolute universe as well. And either way, I trust it's going to be good because Absolute Wonder Woman has been great. Along with this, Ultimate X-Men by Peach Momoko. This is Ultimate X-Men #24. So I think this is the end and of this book. I shouldn't say, the total end. As predicted, there will be a strange continuation of the Ultimate Universe set in the main Marvel universe with Miles Morales and the Origin boxes. Yeah. Script adaptation. And I would love to talk to Zach Davison about that. if again, so that script adaptation by Zach Davison, while the writer and artist is listed as Peach Momoko, and the letter is VC's Travis Lanham, not knowing anybody involved, or not knowing them directly. I know of their reputations. Is I don't know how that book is put together, and so all I know is that I have really enjoyed it because it definitely has an identity all its own, or at least the first year did, and then it's starting to cross more over into the rest of the Ultimate Universe. But it's been really fun to see. I don't know. In my mind, it was a big swing to turn the X-Men over to Peach Momoko, and it's a big swing that worked. Why I loved it for the beginning was it was like reading a Japanese horror manga, but with characters who had similar names to the X-Men and trying to figure out, well, they connect. And really, after one issue, it didn't matter. I was just drawn into what this story was. So I'll catch up with that. I did just confirm it is the last issue of that. Maybe some of these versions will show up in the regular Marvel universe. Maybe, but they are still mutants. So I don't know if an origin box would fix that. At any rate, thank you so much for getting through once again. Again, the wildness. Why I retreat to comics is even a horror comic is still somehow reassuring in a world that is getting weirder and weirder by the day. Uh, at least in fiction, the good guys usually win, and I hope that still holds true for the real world too. We're doing our part, everybody. So, till next time, use your powers for good.